And we're live.
Good afternoon. This is a meeting of the AIB for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. We are joined today by a number of board members. At this time, I'm going to ask that the executive director call the roll, see who's here at this point in time. Would you please do so? Joining us.
Yes, sir. In addition to Chair Leggett, we have Vice Chair Kerwin and members Doss, Stapleton, Mango, and Robinson.
Okay, thank you. Again, let me thank our dedicated staff for all the work and all the time that you've committed to the work and going through a number of very important items, especially since the end of the legislative session, a number of meetings with important constituent groups that continue to involve and continue to have a great deal of time engaged with people who are interested in the work that we are doing. So I cannot thank you enough for all of that work and for the board members who participated. We have a rather long agenda for today. First of all, we're going to adopt the last meeting's summary. I hope that you've had an opportunity to look at it. And if you have any questions or comments or changes that you'd like to make, this is the opportunity at this point in time to do so.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move approval.
Okay, is there a second from that motion?
A second.
I'll second.
Moved and properly second that we approve the summary of last meeting, meetings from the summary from last meeting. There is none readiness. Hearing or seeing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. I'm going to immediately go to the public comments at this point in time. They're in revision. First of all, they're in revision to the agenda. I hope you've had an opportunity to look at it. Okay. If there are no changes, we're going to go through the agenda as published. The first item for us is public comments. I know that we have a couple of written comments in. Are there any live comments or oral presentations for today?
We do have one person. She signed up as Priscilla Young, but I see on the screen her name is Sue Young, but we do have her here. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, and my formal name is Priscilla, but I always go by Sue. So, good afternoon. My name is Sue Young. Over the past several years, I've worked with colleagues to advocate for the formal inclusion of NBCT school counselors at both state and local levels. This is my third time submitting written or spoken testimony to the AIB, with previous testimonies linked in my written statement that I emailed. Throughout this time, I have continued to serve as the sole school counselor at Belvedere Elementary School in AECPS, supporting 540 students in pre-K to 5th grade, including those in 2 regional ACC classrooms and 1 self-contained special needs class. I hold 3 different national certifications in school counseling, and I'm here to advocate for the formal inclusion of NBCT school counselors in the Maryland Blueprint and Career Ladder. Starting next year, all 8 NBCT school counselors in AACPS will receive salary enhancements, unanimously supported by both the Board of Education and County Council. We are still waiting for Maryland to take action to be fully included in the career ladder. Statewide action is needed to ensure all NBCT school counselors in Maryland receive the recognition and support they deserve, so that there's equity and parity within the Maryland Blueprint. Students need school counselors in that role, and the language of, quote, just oversee academic progress of students needs to be more accurately represent student needs of what it means to be successful. The social emotional progress and data tracked by school counselors is critical for students to be present and available for academic learning. Those 2 areas of learning cannot be separated if we are seeking overall student success. As reflective certified counselors, we drive measurable improvements in student success. In addition to teaching Tier 1 classroom lessons to all students in my building, we design and track targeted intervention programs for Tier 2 and 3 students, reporting progress to the Office of School Counseling quarterly. This past year, I launched an attendance intervention for the 25 students with the highest absences, some with over 30 days missed, and 14 of those had IEPs. By the end of this past school year, 23 of those 25 students gained a collective total of 231 additional present school days, averaging to 2 weeks more per student. This comprehensive attendance intervention program that I developed to meet this need included parent conferences, small group counseling, monthly counseling sessions, and staff mentors. It's time to move beyond acknowledgement and take concrete steps to fully integrate school counselors into the Blueprint's vision. School counselors are vital to student success, yet too often we are overlooked in policy implementation. I asked the AIB, along with MSDE, to ensure that the role of the school counselors is thoroughly examined in NORC's interim evaluation of the Blueprint. Under Pillar 2, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, we ask that you address the outstanding directive on page 99 of the Blueprint Plan to issue guidance on the National Board Certification for school counselors and the related salary increases. Despite undergoing the same rigorous NBC process as the teachers and delivering measurable impacts in academic success, college and career readiness, attendance, and social emotional health, we are not yet included. This delay is not just unfair, it's driving early retirements, discouraging service to high-need schools, and ultimately depriving students of the benefits of the most highly trained professionals in our field. Please also adjust the Maryland Blueprint language of, quote, oversee academic progress of students to be more inclusive, such as to oversee academic and social emotional progress of students, working to eliminate barriers to success, such as chronic absenteeism and limited access to supportive resources that promote student growth. Finally, we also urge the AIB and State Board to adopt the nationally recognized 250-to-1 student-to-counselor ratio. My caseload is 540 students to 1 counselor. Current data shows a statewide average of 307-to-1, with some districts exceeding 1,000. That's unacceptable in a time of rising student mental health needs. Thank you very much for your time today.
Could I ask a question on that number you provided?
Sure.
The ratio you mentioned, what was it again?
The national best practices is 250-to-1.
Right. No, what is that you are?
My number, I have 540 students.
And what system are you in now?
I'm in Anne Arundel County.
Okay. Is that pretty typical in Anne Arundel, or just the average, or what? What is it?
It is for the elementary. I think one of the things that another one of my colleagues and I have been working on at the state level is to better to collect the data in a more accurate fashion, because, for example, like a lot of the secondary schools, middle and high school counselors might be closer to that 250 to 300. But at the elementary level, we are still way, I mean, I'm the lead for my feeder system. So in my feeder system, we have myself at 540, another counselor at 650. One school does have 2 school counselors, and they have about 650 students. Another school has about 500. So that's just in my, my direct feeder system.
I see. Do you have an idea of the number of National Board certified counselors we have around the state?
I don't know around the state. I know that in Anne Arundel County, there are 8 of us, and that represents 2% of all of our counselors. So I think there's around 357-ish or so, but basically it's 2% right now.
No, that's in Anne Arundel. I was talking about around the state.
I'm not sure around the state. I know that I would say Jocelyn would probably have a better sense of that. I know that I've participated like in the state legislator night at the Hill, when we go down in February to talk to the representatives of the state to advocate for school counselor support. And she would probably have a better number of the state level.
We'll try to get that. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
All right. Any further questions, Ms. Young? Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
We'll now go to agenda item number 3, MOU between AIB and the State Board of Education. Let me just give a general overview of one thing that I think we need to make sure that we're clear about. The bulk of the things that are included in the MOU are things for which, in an informal and direct way, we have been doing with the board for some time. Our relationship with the board, the times that we meet, the opportunity we have to discuss things, clearly is one that I am very proud of. This is basically a reflection to formalize essentially a good part of what we've been doing for a considerable period of time. And I'm grateful for this process and working with the state board, our staff, and others to memorialize what we've been doing to some degree and to address any concerns that others may have about it. So I don't want people to assume that this is something that is completely new, but a reflection of some of the misunderstanding that's out there as it relates to our working relationship. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our executive director.
Thank you. So with that sort of context, the leadership of the State Board of Education and the AIB, as well as staff from AIB and MSC, have been discussing contents of an MOU since earlier this year. And this is sort of the culmination of that process in adopting the MOU. The State Board did approve the MOU on Tuesday, and now it is before the board for approval. The purpose of the MOU was really to clarify the roles and responsibilities of each agency as we move from the initial implementation of the blueprint into the sort of the ongoing implementation and the next phase of the work as we implement the blueprint, and really to address where there has been some confusion among particularly local education agencies, LEAs, but also some of our state agency partners as well, in terms of who is the lead agency for various pieces of blueprint implementation, and really to just try to provide clarity around that. And so the document that you have before you is there is a very short MOU state document, and then there's an attachment. And if we could share the screen. Thank you, Emma. So for the MOU itself is fairly brief. And as you can see, I really just want to draw your attention to the, if you could scroll down, Emma, to the, there we go. I'm sorry, the bottom of the first page. Right, section 4 around collaboration and information sharing. So this is really where other than sort of standard MOU language, there are five statements there that I just wanted to draw your attention to. So that the parties will meet at least quarterly to discuss progress, challenges, and strategies related to blueprint implementation. This relates to the chair's statement that this is something that the leadership of the two boards have been meeting monthly whenever possible, and that will continue, and that we're committing to do that at least quarterly, but currently and continuing would be trying to do that monthly. Number 2 is that the state board will provide the AIB with all data and reports necessary for monitoring blueprint implementation and holding state and local agencies accountable. The MSD has been providing information data to us as we request, so that will continue. Number 3, that the AIB will share its evaluations and recommendations with the state board to support policy refinement and implementation improvement. We will continue to do that as well. That the parties will maintain open communication channels. And finally, that the parties may jointly adopt blueprint policies to ensure alignment. And as you all know, there have been 4 joint policy that have been adopted by the two boards to date, and to the extent that additional joint policies are necessary, that would occur. And then there is an attachment in Exhibit 1, which provides more detail. It has, and it's small print, but it's available to everyone as well. The roles and responsibilities of the AIB and the state board and MSDE have been identified by pillar or policy area. And you can see in the document that on the far right, there's a reference to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan section, and where there is statutory guidance or requirement, the statute is cited. And so you can see in this document in the roles column that for the most part, either the state board or the AIB leads. There are a few examples where the state board leads and AIB consults, and and vice versa. But for the most part, the goal was to identify a lead for each activity and responsibility so that there was not confusion around who was, who to go to with questions. Overall, the principles that were used were really that AIB's role is around coordinating and supporting implementation, coordinating implementation across state partners and local partners. So not just MSDE, but also the other state agencies that are responsible for implementing the blueprint, as well as the LEAs and other local partners that are implementing the blueprint. And progress monitoring is obviously a key responsibility of the AIB, along with accountability. And so that is where the bulk of the AIBs, where the AIB is leading the work, and with MSDE and the state board leading the actual implementation work, specifically with the LEAs. There are a couple of examples where the AIB has, for the past few years, been more in the lead role of implementation, and there are asterisks for those items. One of them is around the career ladder, establishing new statewide educator career ladder and professional development system. And another is in Pillar 3 related to career counseling. For both of those programs, MSDE is taking on the lead role for implementation moving forward. And so MSDE will be responsible providing guidance and answering questions related to implementation, while the AIB will continue to have the approval process and requirements, which is part of the statutory role of the AIB. I see a number of hands, so with that, I will pause. I believe Dr. Stapleton raised her hand first. No, Dr. Kerwin.
Yes, a very minor point, but just for clarification, one of the first items in the MOU says that the parties will meet 4 times a year. And I assume the parties are the AIB board and the state board. So does that mean that the two boards would meet 4 times a year, or would the leadership meetings count as the parties meeting? And I realize it's a very technical point, but just so we're all clear about it.
I think I think either the leadership or the staff or the entire board would.
Would meet this criteria.
Yes.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And I was just going to raise the same issue because of an article in Maryland Matters Tuesday evening. It was interpreted as being the full board. So I just wanted to make sure there was a common understanding that the parties would include leaders or representatives from the boards.
Excellent. I saw that article too. And as you all know, the boards do meet jointly, typically periodically, typically twice a year. And so we will continue that. And in fact, we are tentatively looking at a September joint board meeting. Dr. Doss.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, how can the public access this document?
It is posted on our website. And we're going to be, after you all vote on this, it will be signed and then The signed version will also be posted on our website and also on MSDE's website.
Thank you.
Absolutely. There any other questions?
Did you mention that the action of the state board?
I did, but I can, the board did discuss and approve the MOU on Tuesday
Okay.
at their board meeting just a couple days ago.
We have to need a motion at this point in time to for approval.
Yes.
Well, I move approval of the MOU as presented. There's a second to the motion.
Second?
Second.
Moved and properly second that we approve as a board the memorandum of understanding between the AIB and state board. It has been published. It has been cited today, and our executive director has in fact gone through some of the highlights of it. Are there any unreadiness about this motion? And it's on the floor. Okay, hearing none, we'll entertain this motion. We'll now vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any negatives? None. The motion is approved. Thank you. Let's go to item number 4, which is an update of the comprehensive plan, the blueprint comprehensive plan.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to start off here, and then a couple of staff are going to go through more specifically the slides. If we can share the slide deck, thank you. So as you all know, the board is required to update the comprehensive plan each year by August 1st. And we are currently, sorry, you can go to the next slide, please. We are currently in the process of collecting feedback on the plan. There is a Google form that has been posted on our website since late May, where we are receiving input from the public and stakeholders. We also, the advisory committees for pillars 1 through 5 have hosted public meetings to collect feedback on suggested changes to the comprehensive plan. So the bulk of these slides are going to provide you with the board and the public who may not have attended all of the advisory committees meetings with a summary of the feedback that we have received so far. And then if you can go to the next slide, the process moving forward is to that survey, that Google form is open to the public through July 11th. And we're also accepting feedback and suggested changes from state and local agencies and other organizations that are involved in blueprint implementation or have suggestions through July 11th. So either through that survey form or via email to the AIB at maryland.gov. Following the receipt of all of that feedback, we will be compiling all of that into a document that will be shared with the public and the board as soon as possible after July 11th. In addition, we are working on, for the legislative changes that were adopted this past session, our staff is already working on a marked up version of the current comprehensive plan to reflect the changes that were adopted by the General Assembly, as well as the change that the AIB has already adopted to the plan regarding the timing of when the comprehensive math plans have to be submitted by the LEAs back in March. the board adopted an amendment to the comprehensive plan that shifted that deadline from June 30th to September 30th. So all of those things are going to be incorporated into a marked up Word document, essentially, so that the actual language is available to everyone for those provisions. And then we'll do the same for the actual provisions that are adopted by the board at the meeting on July 24th. At that, prior to the July 24 meeting, staff has already begun reviewing the feedback and input that we have received so far, and combined with whatever else comes in between now and July 11th, we'll be making recommendations to the board, just as we did in the past couple of years, regarding the suggestions and what is recommended that the board adopt. But as I said, all of the proposed changes will be shared with you and the public well before July 24th. Then as we are looking at the feedback and the input that has been received so far, a number of those suggestions require a legislative change or some type of legislative action. Those are being noted with an asterisk. And those are items that the board cannot, on your own, implement the change in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. It requires some action to be taken at the next session. And so a little bit different than in prior years, for the update this year, we're kind of proposing to disaggregate that process or separate that process. So for the update for August 1st, the board will only consider suggestions that don't require legislative action. And then obviously we are noting and compiling all of the suggested changes that would require a legislative change or a legislative action for the board's consideration after August 1st, after the comprehensive plan is adopted, so that those recommendations will be included in what we put forward to the General Assembly for the upcoming session. So that was a lot of information. If there are any questions in the moment, happy to take them. And you can ask along the way, but the next step is to turn the presentation over to Joyce Schaefer and to Emma Pellerin to go through some of the more specific feedback that we have received. Okay, I don't see any hands right now. So Joy, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm back. You were on the correct slide, slide 6. Great. So we've presented the legislative changes made this session affecting implementation to you in great detail at your April meeting. So these are just summarized here, and they'll be incorporated, as Director Heiss was mentioning, in a more detailed document marked up to show you the changes that will be incorporated in the plan update. And of course, you'll be provided that well in advance of the July 24th meeting, and it will also be available to the public. Next slide, please. So as we focus specifically on the input by pillar that we've received from our public input sessions and through the written comments that we've also received either through the survey on the website or via email, before we go into greater detail on the suggested changes to each pillar, we wanted to share some of the common themes that we've been hearing and seeing across all 5 pillars. And so these include funding and the adequacy of funding, the need for improved communication, both external communication to the public, for example, or internal, and that would be among agencies or divisions within agencies that would be communicating with LEAs or organizations with regard to guidance or anything related to implementation. The increased need for collaboration among those charged with implementation, increased support for students with disabilities and special educators across all pillars. We've heard that comment. And then many commenters asked that the plan incorporate the recommendations of the special education work group and the need for more technical assistance, and that technical assistance be targeted to specific needs and audiences as well as high touch. Before I move on, I'd just like to come back to the recurring theme of incorporating the special education work group's recommendations. So you'll remember that the work group released its final report last December. And an addendum to the final report was presented to the state board at its meeting on Tuesday. So staff will be bringing for your consideration the recommendation to incorporate the special education work group's recommendations into the comprehensive plan. It's our understanding that the recommendations have also been prioritized, and if those have been publicly agreed upon, staff recommendations would reflect that prioritization as well. All of the reports of the work group, the interim, the final reports, as well as the addendum, are posted to the resources page of the AIB's website. And I'll also just note that this process with regard to considering the special education work group's recommendations relative to the comprehensive plan update mirror the process the board went through in 2023 to adopt recommendations put forward by the multilingual learner work group. Next slide, please. So I am not going to spend too much time on the next two slides. They're a high-level summary of themes we received through public comment by pillar. And I'm not going into detail because we'll be picking up all of these themes in the next set of slides and providing a deeper dive into these areas. Next slide, please. We just wanted to provide these to give you a very broad overview, kind of a lay of the land, so to speak. So next slide, please. So we'll go ahead and get started on the feedback and suggested changes by pillar. You'll see on each slide, we indicate when a suggested change, as Director Heiss mentioned, comes from the recommendations of the special education work group. I just want to note that we did not capture every recommendation that is in their final report or addendum, but we did include those we heard during public comment. And then there's the red asterisks if a slide would require legislative action, which doesn't necessarily mean legislation, but rather legislative activity. So anything that might involve advocacy and eventually require potential legislation is marked in this way. So public input for Pillar 1, and I'll just elevate a few of these. We heard a few times to expand the Tier 1 designation to students with special needs, regardless of income. And some commenters specified that this should be done for both 3- and 4-year-olds. Advocating for additional capital funding was something that was suggested, as well as for the update of construction standards, that they reflect blueprint requirements for the expansion of pre-kindergarten. And then with regard to the AIB MSDE Joint Policy number 3, there was a suggestion to create a task force to address the possible effects on sort of the childcare market in total in order to gain an understanding of what might be the outcome of various actions on the part of LEAs relative to the policy, to build an understanding and then a plan that allows the expansion of pre-K access, but with attending to the effects on the childcare market, the private childcare market as a whole. And then streamlining funding mechanisms in a way that prioritizes and increases private provider participation. And this suggestion connects to some on the next slide. So next slide, please. And these were related to, many of these were related to improving access and participation for private providers, some of which is especially relevant to MSDE, and we will certainly share those in detail with them. But they included improving access to the expansion grant application by better aligning timelines, the due dates and et cetera, for private providers with those public providers. Again, in terms of due dates or enrollment, providing higher touch targeted technical assistance and training both an application for the expansion grant, and then throughout the process, and then after as a participant. Improving responsiveness to questions, needs for guidance. And then I'll just also elevate one comment there with regard to private providers having to balance the requirements in both COMAR provisions related to childcare as well as those related to the education program. The input that was shared was sometimes they feel that's conflicting. Next slide, please. In terms of Pillar 2 strategies, suggested changes, a clear and collaborative strategy between LEAs, MSDE, and the AIB to address the delayed implementation of collaborative time requirements. Commenter felt that there was a need for a clear plan developed was critical to meeting both the blueprint's intent as well as the operational feasibility by fiscal 29 when the pause is lifted and the implementation begins. Also, strategies for use of non-instructional time in the career ladder should focus on collaborative time for general and special educators, as well as targeted professional learning. And then I'll note that the last suggested change there on the slide, the removal of requirements for teaching time and national board certification credentials for assistant principals and principals, that would require legislative change. Next slide, please. More suggested changes for Pillar 2 would be to prioritize special educators and duly licensed educators in marketing, recruitment, and outreach efforts, including in the Grow Your Own and other scholarship programs, to disaggregate that data collected for these efforts by special and general educators, developing a statewide plan with benchmark objectives, and then conducting a study to evaluate the effectiveness of national board certification on recruitment, retention of educators, on student outcomes, as well as exploring alternative or parallel pathways. The last suggestion, modify career ladder funding to incentivize earning content area master's degrees in support of dual enrollment instruction. That would require a legislative change. And I want to point out the suggested change in the third bullet. The third bullet is already in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, but as you heard from public comment, the Maryland School Counselor Association requested that the AIB and MSDE fulfill this subtask. That is referenced both in their comment at the Pillar Advisory Council as well as in public comment today on page 99 of the plan, and issue the guidance on eligibility requirements for nationally board certified salary increases for school counselors. Next slide, please. I think we're on to Pillar, and I think Emma, you're going to run through the next couple of pillars.
Yep, absolutely. So for Pillar 3, we saw a focus in some of the suggested changes on support for dual enrollment as well, dual enrollment pathways. So there was a suggestion to extend the cap on dual enrollment courses, the current cap of 4 courses for 1 to 2 more years. There's also a suggestion that there should be a broader definition and framework for college and career readiness overall, as well as allowing local districts to recognize multiple indicators of college and career readiness. I think we, would also point back to the alternative measures for CCR that the state board adopted earlier this year. And I think that some of those were reflected in the specific suggestions that were raised as part of this suggested change, but I don't think all of them. So it would go beyond those as well. There's also a suggested change for disaggregating data related to college and career readiness pathways by program participation, race, income, and special populations. The AIB has already committed to disaggregating this outcome data to the extent possible by demographics, as well as, again, these special populations for students with disabilities, multilingual learners. in other populations. So that is something that we are still committed to as well. And then would also point out the adopting successful completion of college credit as an indicator of college and career readiness as a suggested change. And again, with this focus on dual enrollment as being was very much present in the pillar recommendations here. The next slide, again, this is connected to creating easier certification pathways for educators to teach dual enrollment courses. That was also recommended. And then we had a couple of recommendations related to career and technical education, including updating the CTE committee membership to include individuals with expertise in special education, secondary transition, or employment training for individuals with disabilities. We noted that does require a legislative change to alter the membership of the CTE committee. For Pillar 4, there's a few other recommendations from the special education work group are highlighted here that were shared specifically. Some other recommendations include creating specific progress targets for students with disabilities. So we are, again, committed to disaggregating data by all student groups for the outcome measures that the AIB adopted, as well as just any progress reporting. This specific recommendation is that there should be specific progress targets for students with disabilities that are set in addition to disaggregating this data. In addition, there was a recommendation to add accountability measures to ensure that additional resources are allocated to multilingual learners. We also have in the measures that the AIB adopted back in 2023, a measure related to students achieving the goals set in their IEPs. And there was a recommendation to eliminate this measure from the set of measures adopted by the AIB for a few different reasons. But again, the other recommendation that was connected to this was that we set progress targets instead for students with disabilities that are still connected to some of the outcome measures that the AIB adopted related to student achievement. In addition, there were a few recommendations related to social emotional learning, integrating SEL into the elementary school curriculum, and requiring community schools to develop and maintain a dedicated webpage on their school's website that shares details about the needs assessments that community schools complete, their resources, budget, and the implementation plan that they are also required to complete. I'd also just highlight the providing targeted technical assistance to support the implementation of the special education work group's recommendations. As we noted, we have in a couple of places the recommendation to incorporate all of the work group's recommendations. And then this one is specifically focused on providing targeted assistance to actually implement those recommendations. And the last but not least pillar, for Pillar 5, related to governance and accountability. We heard a lot of feedback related to the implementation and structure of the expert review teams by multiple contributors, but they mainly revolved around restructuring the ERTs to include the expert review teams themselves, to include more reviewers and content area experts, and in addition to ensure that they have fewer visits to complete, because the number of visits has gotten, from the feedback that we heard, was too much. Expanding the ERT staff as well, in addition to the number of reviewers, organizing visits by geographic area to make them more efficient, and providing the reports from the ERT visits to LEAs in a timely manner. In addition to updating the data that is collected during ERT visits to include identification of students with disabilities, least restricted environment rates, proficiency gaps for students with and without disabilities, and measures related to school culture. We also got some recommendations to launch public interactive dashboards that demonstrate the blueprint's impact. We will actually be talking a little bit more about that later. And to expand the specific public outreach and feedback responsibilities assigned to the AIB in the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, to go beyond what is currently there. And then for the last slide, there was a recommendation to propose a legislative change to remove the use of PISA to benchmark student performance based on exclusion rates, to also consolidate the number of required reports from LEAs. We will also talk about that in just a minute. And then overall to develop additional equity-driven outcome measures in addition to what the AIB has already adopted, and allowing for aggregate reporting for minimum school funding. And I think that this was touched on earlier, but another recommendation was to advocate for sufficient foundation funding, including transportation funding as part of the funding formula. Okay. I think I'm ready to turn it back over to Joy unless there's any questions.
Well, the question that I think we need to explain to the public what is the current policy on dual enrollment.
Are you referring to, can you go back to the other slide? You're referring to the joint policy?
Right.
The cap, what's referred to as a cap.
Right.
Yeah. So, and this, you can see this has an asterisk next to it because while the state board and AIB did adopt a joint policy regarding what is referred to as a cap, but it's actually a minimum number of dual enrollment courses that LEAs must give college and career ready students an opportunity to take 4 courses in high school. So what is referred to as a cap is that they have to offer college and career ready students the ability to take at a minimum 4 dual enrollment courses while they are in high school. Right. The request is that be extended by 1 to 2 years. The authority for the AIB and the state board to adopt that minimum or that policy is in statute, and it expires. So it applied to this current school year and the next 2 school years. So to extend it beyond the 26-27 school year would require legislation.
Right. Okay.
And that is why it has an asterisk next to it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
There's one more slide on report recommendations, but so we don't want to limit questions, but we're happy to take questions on all these slides. But Dr. Doss, would it be okay if we do the last slide and then take your question?
Sure.
Or is it on dual enrollment?
No, it's overall. So sure.
Okay, great. Okay. Can we go to that report recommendation slide? Great. Thank you. Joy?
So staff considered each of the 18 reports that are mandated by the blueprint in order to identify those that could be eliminated or modified to ease the reporting burden. And to guide our recommendation, we applied a standard set of guiding questions to assess the need and value of the information contained in each report, including what or who requires this report. Is the data provided helpful for accountability purposes? Is the data available elsewhere? And if so, would we be able to rely on that source in order to continue to provide the data to us if this report is eliminated? So in our review of those 18 mandated reports, 11 are required by state statute. And so 7 reports are required by the Blueprint Comprehensive Implementation Plan. 3 of those are one-time reports, and they've been completed, so we set those aside. 4 are reports that could be eliminated subject to the board's approval. And so AIB staff will include in our recommendation for updates to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan that the 4 listed on this slide be eliminated. The LEA feedback and recruitment campaign, which data should be picked up elsewhere, Obstacles to preventing prospective teachers from pursuing a teaching degree. Again, that data will be provided by other data and reports. The diversity hiring report is the same. And then community schools, healthcare practitioner, the level of coverage at each community school is also available in the other community school reporting information. So we'll be bringing these back to you as part of our set of recommendations for the update. But we're sharing those with you here today.
Good, thank you. Hi, sir.
Dr. Doss.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. For our suggested changes, we received many changes that require legislative action. And so we don't want folks to think that because it requires legislative action that their suggestions are mute or won't go forward or anything. So can you just clarify what is the protocol when we have suggested changes like this that require legislative action and maybe what can be done to move those changes forward?
Sure. So so for the updated for the update that by August 1st, we are just setting those aside because we don't want to incorporate changes into the comprehensive plan that are dependent on contingent on future legislative change. So we're absolutely considering them. We're just sort of like for the purpose of the update and for what the board will consider on July 24th, anything that would require a legislative action will not be part of those recommendations. Following that meeting, the board will consider, we will bring back to the board all of those suggested changes that do require legislative action for discussion and ultimately staff would bring a recommendation to the board for your consideration regarding legislative recommendations for the upcoming session. And then for those that move forward during session, if they are adopted by the legislature, then we would incorporate them in the next update following the session.
Okay, great.
Are there any other questions? It's a lot of information, I know. We wanted to make sure that we were sharing this information with you and with the public now so that there's ample time to consider the suggestions. And as we said, staff will be bringing recommendations to the board and making those public prior to the July 24 meeting. Dr. Kerwin.
Yes, I just want to emphasize a point that I think you've made, but you can confirm it. We heard a lot from the superintendents that the state board and AIB required, the number of reports that they required was just overwhelming. Required of them was overwhelming. It was taking an inordinate amount of time. Assuming that the AIB approves the staff recommendations, am I right that the only reports that AIB would require would be those mandated in statute?
Is that correct?
I'm sorry. Can you just restate
Assuming that the staff recommendations are made, are approved by the AIB board, the only reports that AIB would require from the superintendents or the LEAs would be ones that are mandated in law.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And just to state the obvious, just like we're receiving feedback about provisions that would require legislation in the comprehensive plan, it is possible that and if we receive additional and we have asked the LEAs and the superintendents if there are reports that are mandated by the blueprint in statute that they would like to be considered for change or elimination, to share that with us. So it is possible that there could be in the future a recommendation to change a report that is required by statute. But yes, with
Yeah.
the elimination of these four, all of the reports that AIB is requiring in the comprehensive plan are required by statute.
Right. Thank you.
All right.
Is there other question about that? Then we go to the next item, Ms. Heiss?
Could I
Yes.
just add real quickly, you know, I'm really quite impressed by the degree, the amount of feedback we've gotten. I think this is a very healthy thing. It's clear that the public has taken the time to comment on the update of the plan, and there's just a wealth of suggestions here, some of which we will undoubtedly support, some of which we may not. But there is a lot of work to be done on the part of the staff to go through all of this material and come back to the board with recommendations on revisions to the plan. And we will do that at our July meeting.
Yes, and we will share those recommendations well prior to the meeting, both with the board and for the public to
Yeah.
review.
Well, I just want to comment on what a healthy process I think this is. And I feel very good about the engagement that we've had with the public to get this volume of suggestions about the blueprint and ways to improve it.
And I do thank you for that. And I do want to also thank our advisory committees who held the public input sessions with members of the public to give them an opportunity to share their comments in orally and in public, as well as all those who signed up and
Yeah.
made these public comments. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think it's a perfect example of the value of the advisory committees. For them to take on this responsibility has been hugely beneficial to us.
Indeed.
Yeah, thank you. Going to-
Okay. Going to the next item on the agenda, which is the state agency plan updates, and this relates to the blueprint implementation plans. As you know, the board has approved the Higher Education Commission plan as well as the joint MSDE MHEC plan. And today we have for your consideration a recommendation of approval for the Maryland State Department of Education plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Emma Pellerin, who up to now has been, since the AIB's creation, the implementation plan director, and has now moved into the role of accountability director as we are sort of moving into the next phase of implementation. So, Emma.
Thank you. Just as Executive Director Heiss said, we are pleased to share the recommendation for the State Department of Education's approval of their 2024 implementation plan. We have reviewed the updated submissions for the plan that have been submitted from January through May of 2025. And have met with MSD staff to discuss next steps. And we are eager to show the updated plan today and that it meets the criteria for success and are recommending it for approval. I'm going to go ahead and show the recommendation for approval here. And it is a little small, so let me zoom in. Similar to the MHEC plan, as well as the joint plan between MHEC and MSDE that was shared last month with you all, there are a series of implementation actions that are identified in the recommendation for approval that are included on the screen in front of you, and I'll just walk through quickly now. So the first implementation action is that all implementation activities set forth in the plan by either the date provided by MSDE in the plan, or if a date wasn't specified, the activity will be completed by June 30th, 2027. So that is the first required implementation action as part of the recommendation for approval. Number two, to develop on or before December 1st, 2025, an interagency plan with MHEC and CTE committee for creating and implementing career pathways, including a timeline for implementation. This was also included with MHEC's recommendation for approval. And when it is ready, the CTE committee's recommendation for approval will also include this step. The third implementation action is to identify any differences between the high quality pre-K standards identified in Maryland Code and the Excel's accreditations standards, and to provide technical assistance to pre-K providers in meeting any high quality standards that are not captured in Excel's or accreditation, but are instead covered by the MOUs. And we will talk more about that in just a couple minutes. And then finally, to develop and implement a plan for communicating the CCR's definition and purpose, the CCR standards definition and purpose to interest holders at the state and local levels, including students, educators, families, district leadership, agency staff, and the general public. Before I think I can just go ahead and move on to the strengths as well as areas for growth, unless there are any immediate questions I can answer now around the implementation actions.
Let's go on then.
Okay, great. Similar to the other recommendations for approval, we summarize the process that we've gone through here, and you can find the links to the original implementation plan as well as requests for revisions and the updates as well. And we also have identified a few areas of strength and opportunity that I'll speak to now. We wanted, of course, earlier today, we talked a little bit about the feedback that has been shared from pre-K providers as part of the advisory committee sessions. We did want to note that MSDE's implementation plan describes a range of resources and incentives that they have provided or plan to provide to participating private pre-K programs and LEAs to support them in publishing higher quality ratings in Maryland Excels. Some of those include a peer mentoring program, as well as information sessions on Excels and professional development to support the understanding of and implementation of these high quality standards. We look forward to seeing how those progress and hearing more about them. But we did want to highlight their inclusion in the plan because I think they show great promise. MSD's plan also notes that they have, and this speaks to one of the implementation actions, that they've identified a set of high quality pre-K standards, including, or that the blueprint has identified a set of high quality pre-K standards that need to be met by fiscal year 28, and that the standards are largely monitored through Excels and the Maryland accreditation system, and that those standards not monitored through the system will be supported by the MOUs that exist between LEAs and private providers. We recommend, and that's why we've also included this in the implementation action, that those specific standards that are not included in Excels and or are not monitored through the Excels and accreditation system should be identified just to ensure that providers receive targeted support for meeting those standards. We also wanted to highlight the supports that MSD is providing to LEAs in planning and implementing pathways and opportunities for students to meet the CCR standard before 10th grade. They highlighted the lack of referrals for underserved students to participate in gifted and talented programs as well as in advanced pathways. And they also noted the professional development opportunities that they are implementing or will be implemented to address this challenge. And finally, we wanted to note that MSD commits to either continuing to implement new strategy that they will implement or will continue to implement new or existing strategies in support of reaching blueprint outcomes at the state level, or disseminating best practices aligned with these outcomes to LEAs for local implementation. So, they talk about these strategies throughout their plan, which is great. And we recommend that they track the use and impact of these best practices towards the blueprint's outcomes across the 5 pillars, in terms of continuing to evolve with which strategies are proving most effective to reaching the blueprint's outcomes. Any questions about the strengths? Otherwise, I can speak a little bit to some further areas for growth that we wanted to highlight. Just a couple things that were not reflected in the implementation actions, but we did just provide some feedback on. The plan notes that the new computer adaptive kindergarten readiness assessment ensures that all students are administered the test in the same manner, and that should help to safeguard against bias. And that MSD does still plan to implement quality assurance measures and regular monitoring of assessment practices and feedback mechanisms to address any inconsistencies or areas for improvement. We recommend that those quality assurance measures include measures of potential bias for the KRA's administration, because knowing that, yes, the adaptive nature of the KRA should help to safeguard against bias, but since those quality assurance measures, there will be quality assurance measures established, we recommend including that, as well as developing a clear plan for addressing any indications of bias that the measures pick up. MSD's plan also does not
Could I ask a question about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, as I recall, there were some concern raised about the equity bias in the current KR, kindergarten readiness exam. KR, is it KRE?
KRA.
Yeah. And am I right that the state board or MSDE issued a contract to somebody to study the exams? Was it Johns Hopkins, some group from Johns Hopkins, or was another organization? Anyway, there was some organization, and what you're telling us, has that report been completed, and has MSDE adopted changes to the KRE based on that report?
I think Executive Director Heiss can speak more to this, but there is a new KRA that has been developed in collaboration with a vendor, and I cannot remember the vendor's name at this.
Okay, it doesn't matter who the vendor is, but will it? And when will this be now implemented? When will this new KRA be implemented?
I believe it's this fall, right?
I think they're piloting it this fall. And then it will be formally
used
for all in the following fall.
Right. I'm pleased.
As a result of, so just to confirm your very good memory, the previous KRA was found to have some bias. And so as a result, the state superintendent decided to put out an RFP for a new and different KRA.
Right.
And that process, took a while, and now the vendor has been selected, the KRA has been developed, and will now be administered. This feedback is really just to ensure that we continue to monitor the new KRA,
right,
to ensure that there isn't any bias
Gotcha.
in the process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm just pleased that the process for revising it has been completed.
Yes,
subject to the piloting.
exactly.
Right.
All right, Emily, anything else to that?
Yes, we just had a few other things to highlight, and the one of them being that MSD's plan does not include proactive support or describe proactive supports that they'll be offering to LEAs in developing and implementing career ladders. They have separately articulated plans to continue the community of practices that AIB has been leading that were centered on career ladders and that AIB initiated. And these have been really well received. So we think that those offerings and continuing to implement those offerings and will be help to create a shared understanding of the career ladder's purpose. And that is really critical for effective local implementation. We also noted that their plan for disseminating guidance and technical assistance to LEAs to ensure that students are aware of and prepared to succeed in their post-CCR pathway of choice really focuses on the development and implementation of 6-year plans. They do note that these are a guiding mechanism for career counselors to help students choose a post-CCR pathway, and they say that they will be providing professional development and technical assistance on using the 6-year plan. And so we understand that and know that that will be a really important tool for career coaches. We just wanted to highlight the importance of effectively implementing these professional development sessions and technical assistance offerings, because they really will be critical to helping ensure that career coaches meet their statutorily required role of helping students select and pursue a post-CCR pathway, since there's such a tremendous focus on the 6-year plans as a tool for students to follow their to select and follow their post-CCR pathway of choice. And then just finally, MSD's plan and describes their overall approach to ensuring continuous improvement statewide. And moving forward, we recommend that they use the tools and systems identified and described in their approach to continuous improvement to create differentiated supports for school districts for LEAs based on where they are not yet meeting the blueprint's goals. So we wanted to highlight that as well. Yes, I think I see Member Manko's hand.
Yeah, can we go back real quick to the bullet around the support around the career ladders?
Yes.
Just so that I understand this correctly, does this means that MSDE really is going to be functioning in a more auxiliary role, and the AIB is taking the lead on providing those kind of supports, or who do the LEAs get support from in terms of developing their career ladders?
So it's actually the reverse. So up to now, the AIB has taken more of the lead role, although it has been in collaboration with MSDE to develop guidance and provide responses to questions around the career ladder. The AIB also did, through our technical assistance grant, support a strategy lead for career ladder this year, and host monthly community of practice meetings for LEAs to support their career ladder development. Moving forward, and in keeping with the MOU, MSDE is going to be taking on that lead role in supporting LEAs in developing their career and implementing their career ladders. And the plan, when MSDE originally wrote their plan, this was before the MOU. And so the plan doesn't specifically, I think it refers to holding office hours, and it's not silent on it, but it wasn't as prominent as it now will be, because they are taking on that lead role, including and that they have committed to facilitating a community of practice for career ladder and continuing that community of practice, because it has been, I think, incredibly valuable and valued by the LEAs. And so It's not in their plan, which is why we wanted to make sure that we included it in the feedback.
So then this feedback helps to hopefully bring their plan in greater alignment with the MOU that we just approved earlier.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Great. Thank you so much.
Well put.
Okay, Emma, is there anything else we need to do on this? Because we need to take a vote on the MSD.
We're all set. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay. Well, I move the approval of the MSD plan. Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Okay, moved and properly second. We'll now entertain any unreadiness for the vote. Are any questions, comments one would like to make at this point in time?
I think my only comment would just be,
Sure.
hats off to our team who worked so diligently on it and the MSDE team, because I know there was so much back and forth around this and a lot of discussion and good collaborative work. And I think it just echoes the partnership between AIB and MSDE. And we're so grateful to Dr. Wright and her team, and then of course to Executive Director Heiss and our team here, who have been able to collaborate so thoroughly on this really, really thoughtful, comprehensive plan.
Okay. Any other?
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify that the motion includes the recommendation for approval with those four required implementation.
Yes.
Yep.
Any other unreadiness? If not, the motion is before us. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
And I will just note, because that we do now have Dr. Lynch has joined the meeting.
Welcome aboard. Okay, let's go to the next item, please.
There's one more, just a quick update on the two remaining plans that we have not brought to the board for approval yet. One is the CTE committees, and we recently received their last, what we believe will be the last round of revisions, and are reviewing that. And so we think we should be in a position to bring that to the board for approval next month. That leaves the Juvenile Services Education Program Plan, JSEP, which we have reviewed and met with them to discuss and receive revisions. The remaining element is their literacy plan.
Okay.
And that has been reviewed by Mile, and MSC is currently reviewing Mile's comments, and will be providing feedback around the literacy plan and possible revisions that are needed. And so we will continue to work towards that. There is, you probably have seen that there is some change in leadership both at the Juvenile Services Department as well as within JSEP. So we're going to continue to pursue this, but it may take a little longer than next month.
Okay.
All right, that is that item. So I think we can now move on to the next item, which is
The update.
progress monitoring update. So if we can, we just really wanted to share, and this will be pretty brief, an update on, so for this year, as we have discussed, the implementation plans that the LEAs have submitted cover a 3-year period through 2027. And so we are not asking the LEAs to provide a written update to their entire plans this year. but instead, we're going to be holding progress monitoring conferences, which Emma is going to talk about in a minute. In addition, there are a couple of submissions that the LEAs do have to submit this year for AIB approval. One is the career ladder for level 4 for the lead teacher and the distinguished lead teacher roles. We have previously we have shared guidance with the LEAs that was developed in collaboration with MSDE around what is required to be submitted this year for the career ladders. It primarily focuses on level 4, but there are other provisions as well. And as we adopted recently the joint policy with MSDE regarding level 4 pilot programs for lead teacher role, those would also be included in the career ladder submissions this year. Those are due on July 1st. And so we will be tracking receipt of those and reviewing them and sharing that information with the board as we go through that process. You can see the timeline here for review of the career ladder submissions. Essentially, we're going to be reviewing them over the summer as they come in on a rolling basis, and hope to bring the first recommendations for approval to the board in September. At the monthly meetings in October and November, with that December 1st timeline that we're under per statute, to give a warning to any LEA that is at risk of having its blueprint funds not released. So this is the schedule that we're going to be pursuing as we review the career ladder submissions. This is essentially a very similar schedule to what we followed last year. And to some degree, it is, of course, dependent on the timing of when career letters are submitted, because we do recognize that they are subject to negotiation, and not all LEAs have completed their negotiations. So that is the career ladder submission. The other submission, separate submission that is required again this year, as every year, is there an updated MOU for career counseling among the partners between the local workforce boards, the community colleges, and of course the LEAs. The timeline, oops, sorry, you go. Perfect. So the timeline for career counseling is I've got to look at my screen because it's cut off a little bit on my screen here. There we go. Okay. I'm sorry. Can you go now to the timeline? There we go. So what we've asked for the partners to provide us by July 1st and let us know if they will need to revise their MOU or if they will be submitting a budget addendum, because the MOU has to include, each year it has to include the budget for the upcoming year. That can just be done as an addendum. A few of them essentially allocate a percentage of the total available to each partner. And so not every county has to revise their MOU each year, but most of them do. So we have notified them based on the AIBs, the information that we have, whether we believe that they will need to revise their MOU, but we're asking them to notify us by July 1st and then submit those revised MOUs and addendums signed and executed, which takes time to get through that process across the 3 partners, by September 2nd. We will, of course, take them sooner than that, and we will review the submissions on a rolling basis and bring those approval recommendations to the board at the monthly meetings beginning in September. And again, we have that December 1st timeline for any possibility of not releasing blueprint funds to an LEA. If there are no questions on career ladder or career counseling, we can move on to the progress monitoring conferences. And I am going to ask Emma to discuss this.
Absolutely. So we have some updates related to the progress monitoring conferences that we will be holding this year with each LEA. We first discussed this back during the joint board meeting earlier this year. I think it was January. And so we have some more concrete updates and details to share with you about this process. As Executive Director Hai said earlier, in lieu of a plan, we will be meeting, the AIB will be meeting with each LEA for a conference in summer and fall of 2025. Summer or fall. I think I said and, just fall, summer or fall. The conferences will be structured as a dialogue in which LEA and AIB representatives will directly engage in reviewing progress towards blueprint outcomes. And we are excited for this dialogue and this conversation, and it will be, I think, really helpful in terms of knowing where LEAs are, what have successes they've seen, and what challenges they've encountered in terms of blueprint implementation. And we do know that, of course, they have submitted implementation plans that have been approved by the AIB. So in the course of these dialogues, if there's any agreements on changes that need to be made to the approved 2024 blueprint plans, those will be documented as part of these dialogues. The evidence and insights that will be gathered during each conference will serve as one of several inputs that the board will consider when making determinations regarding the release of blueprint funds that they will be voting on, that the board will be voting on later this year. And these meetings will not be public, but a meeting summary will be made available following each meeting. Can we go to the next slide? So the conferences themselves, and will take place in person in either Baltimore and Annapolis, and we are in the process of scheduling these conferences right now with each LEA. We won't be able to cover all of the blueprint in a single conversation. That is just way too immense. And we also know that with blueprint implementation, there are really key components of implementation and progress monitoring that we need to focus on depending on where we are in the timeline of blueprint implementation, because we know that there are specific activities or outputs or inputs that we need to ensure are in place to ultimately reach the overall outcomes and long-term outcomes of the blueprint. So that really brought us to focus on these particular areas of blueprint implementation as part of the progress monitoring conferences. So rather than focusing on every pillar and all of every pillar, we're focusing on specific areas within each pillar that are highlighted here. So pillar 1 focuses on early childhood education. We are specifically focusing during the 2025 conferences on pre-K expansion for priority students. And we're looking at measures of pre-K access for Tier 1 4-year-olds and enrollment in full-day pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. The focus area for Pillar 2, which is on high quality and diverse teacher and leaders, is the teacher pipeline. We know that having a strong teacher pipeline is important for actually expanding and diversifying the teacher workforce in Maryland. And the measures we're looking at specifically here include the number of conditionally licensed teachers, teacher vacancies, teacher retention rates, and the number of nationally board certified teachers in each LEA and across the state. In Pillar 3, which focuses on college and career readiness, we know that both boards adopted aligned metrics last summer related to proficiency in MCAP scores for ELA and math. And that is the focus area for this pillar. Of course, we know that this pillar and the blueprint overall looks at education across the pre-K through 12 spectrum. But central to the blueprint theory of change is a focus on ensuring that students are getting the supports that they need early on to set up for success in later grades and help to reach the CCR standard and engage in the post-CCR pathways that are part of the blueprint. So this is, a key focus area for us for 2025, while we're still earlier on in terms of blueprint implementation. So we'll be looking at proficiency in ELA and math for grades 3 through 8, because those are again, those are aligned metrics that were adopted by both boards last summer. And, also just speaking to some of the things that we heard from the advisory committee public hearings, we will be disaggregating that data and that progress by student groups. So students with disabilities, multilingual learners, students from economically disadvantaged households, among others. And for pillar 4, which is broadly the focus on more resources for students to be successful, we'll be focusing on outcomes for at-promise students in community schools, specifically looking at ELA and math proficiency for those metrics around ELA and math proficiency in grades 3 through 8 for community school students, as well as rates of chronic absenteeism. And then finally, pillar 5, which focuses on governance and accountability broadly, we'll be looking at progress to meeting the minimum school funding requirements that are outlined in the blueprint. LEAs will also have the opportunity to identify one additional topic for discussion aligned with one of the 5 blueprint pillars during the conference. So we do have these 5 areas that we're looking at for every LEA, but if there is a particular pillar that an LEA wants to talk about, either because they've achieved such great success that they want to share that with the AIB, or maybe they're experiencing challenges, or it's just something that they want to highlight, we will be taking those suggestions and incorporating that into the agenda so we have time to talk about that. Yes, I see your hand, Dr. Kerwin.
Yes. First of all, I think this is structured very well. And I personally like the topics that you have identified for us to focus on. They seem especially relevant to me. The meetings where will these, you said that there'll be in-face meetings, but where will they be?
They will be held in either Baltimore or Annapolis.
Baltimore or Annapolis, okay.
Yes.
And
sorry, go ahead. Yes.
I was going to say we're looking for at least one board member to be present at each of these meetings.
Yes.
So it will, and they're coming up in the not too distant future. So I know you're working on scheduling, but getting those dates out will be very helpful in order for us to be able to, volunteer for the various sessions. There'll be 24 of them, right?
Yes.
24, and we have now only 6 members, so each on average we would each go to 4 at least.
I think that if we were to divide it evenly, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But Executive Director Heiss, did you want to?
I just said on average.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We will have additional board members coming on board, hopefully
So
in August.
we'd have 7.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Right.
For the bulk of them. We are we have been getting feedback from blueprint coordinators and superintendents. We've gotten several rounds of feedback from them. One request was some of the superintendents wanted to be able to hold these conferences before the school year started, because once the school year starts, they wouldn't be able to. Others felt like that was not a good time for them, and they would actually want to wait until after the school year started. So we are offering a pretty broad time frame to hold these conferences between sort of essentially mid-August and mid to late October.
Okay.
And yes, we will share the dates as soon as we have them. We are collecting requests from the LEAs, and then we're going to take those dates and turn around and see who's able to go to what.
Thank you.
Emma, do you want to go to the
Yeah.
next one?
Yeah, and thank you for that feedback. And yeah, so this is just related to next steps, some of which include the conferences. We, as Executive Director Heiss just said, we're working to schedule the conferences and we'll report back as soon as possible. In addition, state and local data dashboards related to blueprint measures will be posted on the AIB website in summer and fall 2025. So we're looking forward to having those posted as soon as they're ready. AIB and MSDE are drafting additional targets for aligned metrics for joint board consideration. These are in addition to the aligned metrics and associated targets that were adopted last summer and that are available on the AIB website if you'd like to take a look. But these targets will be related to career ladder participation, including the number of nationally board certified teachers, CCR standard achievement, student to school counselor ratio, and the number of school psychologists per school. Finally, we wanted to share that we are working to identify leading indicators of progress to prioritize for additional target setting. These would include measures that are not reflected in the aligned metrics adopted by AIB and the state board, but that we have not yet set targets for it, or there are not targets embedded in legislation, and that still need targets, and we will be continuing to share those as we identify them. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
No, I do not see any other hands.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the minimum school funding waiver policy, which is in section 5-234 of the education article. We talked about this at the last board meeting and had a proposal which had some great discussion at the last meeting, and we have come back with a revised recommendation for the board's consideration. The current policy requires the LEAs to submit a request for a waiver for, in this case, for fiscal year 26 by October 31st. That date is, we've received feedback from LEAs that date is problematic, and primarily because the time for the LEAs to have their final fiscal 25 data for expenditure data reported in PowerSchool to determine their baseline, the number of schools that are meeting the minimum school funding requirement and the number of students attending schools that meet the minimum school funding requirement. That data will not be available until towards the end of September and is required to be reported in PowerSchool by October 15th. So that essentially gives them, you know, approximately a month to review the data, submit it to PowerSchool, and also submit a waiver request. So we had originally proposed a date that was essentially at the end of the fiscal year. That was not something the board was comfortable with. So the revised proposal is to change that submission deadline from October 31st to December 1st. So that would give them another essentially month to review their data, determine where they are in terms of meeting the minimum school funding requirement in fiscal 26, and submit a waiver request by December 1st, based on that information and their budgeted, how they've allocated their budgeted resources for the year. The LEAs can request a waiver for more than 1 year, But if they were asking for a waiver that included fiscal year 26, they would need to submit that by December 1st under this proposal. And the other piece of that is to revise the current policy to require the LEAs to specifically note what fiscal year or years they're requesting a waiver for. So that's summary. We do have a document that we can share if there are any more specific questions. And it's available as well.
Okay.
So essentially, right now, LEAs need to submit a waiver request by October 31st if they are going to request a waiver from the minimum school funding requirement in fiscal year 26. This proposal would give them until December 1st to submit a request for a waiver. Are there any questions or discussion?
And the time for how all of this works out, it's not just that date, but can you back through the other time frames and explain that out a little bit? The other times?
So
when response, action, that kind of stuff.
Oh, right. So this is just the timeline for when they have to submit the waiver request. There are no changes to the rest of the policy in terms of the next steps for the timeline for consideration of the waiver request by the AIB. So there would still be the timeline. I think they have, let me pull it up here. They have 15 days to request a public hearing, and then the board will consider the information, the supporting documents, and make a decision on a waiver after that. So the timeline after they submit a waiver request is not changing.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at is what is the dates or time frame with the school schedule that we're trying to align here to make sure that that's properly aligned.
What's the rationale for the change, in other words?
Right.
Oh, okay. I thought I already covered that, but essentially the concern with the current date of October 31st is that the LEAs will not have sufficient time to review their final expenditure data from the current fiscal year, from fiscal year 25. And as you, the requirement in fiscal year 26 for the minimum school funding requirement is different than the permanent requirement. So the AIB and the state board adopted a policy that provided a sort of a 3-year runway for LEAs to meet fully meet the minimum school funding requirement, with the fiscal year 25 data, which is the year that we're currently finishing, as the baseline year, and fiscal year 27 being the year when all LEAs would be expected to meet the minimum school funding requirement for all their schools. For fiscal year 26, the requirement is essentially to reduce by half the number of schools that are not meeting the requirement in 25. So essentially, they have to know their baseline data in order to determine what the requirement is for fiscal year 26. And so that timing, October 31st, is very close to when the final closeout audited expenditure data for the fiscal year will be available. And so this would give them more time to review that data, determine what they're required to do for fiscal year 26, and then submit a waiver request if they believe that they need a waiver. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, we didn't put any hard dates on the response, did we?
No.
Okay. And this is only for, at least to start with, for the upcoming year, correct?
The policy is for all years,
Okay.
but obviously the policy can be changed. Yeah.
The dates, the dates time. Because we had some discussion about whether we would alter the dates going forward beyond this initial year.
So the way the revised policy is currently drafted, the date would move from October 31st to December 1st. But that's something that can be revisited after this year.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? Since this is a change in dates, we would have to vote on this, I assume, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. We now have the October 1st, 31st date.
December 1st.
I'm sorry, December 1st. Are there any further questions about this before I entertain a motion? Okay. Then I will make a motion that we approve the waiver request with the aforementioned dates and timeline as an item for the board's approval at this point. Formally make the motion to do so. There's second to the motion to approve the waiver request timeline.
Second.
Moved and properly second. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll now entertain the motion. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Okay, let's move on. I think we're ready for the update.
Yes. Okay. So I'm very pleased to announce that we had a very successful recruitment this spring, sort of winter spring, and we have been able to bring aboard 3 new staff who actually started yesterday. We have a policy analyst for Pillar 1, which is early childhood education, which is Alex Baum, who comes from us from Michigan and from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, most recently where he has been working in their preschool program. For Pillar 5, we have 2 new hires. Liz Smith is going to be the Pillar 5 sort of policy analyst, working in governance and accountability, and particularly in the progress monitoring area. Liz comes to us from a career with the DC public school system in a number of roles, but in particular working in strategic planning and in working with schools as they are implementing change. And we also are very pleased to have a financial analyst coming on board, Simone Hall, who also is coming from the DC Public Schools, where she has worked specifically with schools and their budgeting at the school level, and sort of liaisoning between the central office and the schools. So we're very pleased to have all 3 of them aboard. And if you all want to maybe just turn your cameras on so everyone can see you, say hello. They will be joining meetings as with MSDE, with the LEAs, and we will be integrating them, sort of throwing them into the deep end with the AIB, as there is always a lot of work to do here. But we're really pleased to have all of you on board, so welcome.
Welcome aboard. Thank you.
And then we do we also were recruiting for a permanent Pillar 3 analyst for college and career readiness. That is in process, so we will announce that as soon as we can. I already shared that Emma has moved into that accountability director position. We're very happy about that. And that leaves essentially 2 remaining positions that are both administrative to fill. One due to a retirement, and the other is our last open position. I do want to share that just this week, the governors did announce a hiring freeze for state government. So we're still working through the details of that and the impact, but we're hopeful that we will be able to still get fully staffed in the next few months. There also, for the upcoming fiscal year, is the legislature adopted a budget reduction based on personnel vacancies. And so we did just receive notice of a small reduction in our fiscal year 26 budget related to the personnel spending. So we will talk more about that next month as we move into the fiscal year. But at this time, we feel like it's manageable. But we'll share more information on that because it's just very new information. Moving on to the finance update, we wanted to share some updates, and we also, as we are just a few days from the close of fiscal year 25, we do have as a couple of motions to encumber funds for the end of the fiscal year. So the first update is just on our website redesign contract. We have gone ahead and issued a no cost extension so that we can complete that work. We were, as you may recall, a little the process did not start on time and has been a bit delayed in awaiting information and guidance from the Department of Information Technology. We are really making progress on the website redesign. I know that we're all anxious to be able to launch that. Arshia will provide a little more update in a few minutes, but we are hopeful that we will be able to launch the new website this summer. The next items do relate to motions that the board will need to vote on. And the first, I think the slide deck and the agenda are not quite in the same order, but we'll go with the agenda, the slide deck here. So the first item relates to the blueprint interim evaluation that NORC has been hired to conduct. We do have a contract modification to bring to you all. Essentially, during the 2025 session, the General Assembly added an additional component to the evaluations that the AIB is required to complete. And this one is for career counseling. The statute provides some specific requirements for that evaluation, as well as deliverables. And we went to NORC and asked them to provide us with a proposal to incorporate that into the interim evaluation. They have done so. We have shared that with you. And the proposal is to modify the contract by $220,000 to support the evaluation of career counseling as part of the overall interim evaluation. And we do have a specific motion.
Okay, yes. We have to have a motion on each one of them, right?
We do.
Okay. So which one we're taking first?
This one is the motion, the blueprint interim evaluation contract modification.
Okay.
And I can read it, or we can put it on the screen, either one.
Excuse me, Executive Director, we do have a hand
Yes.
raised.
Oh, thank you. I'm not seeing that at the
Dr.
moment.
Stapleton.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Doss. I wasn't sure when we wanted to discuss any parts of this, but in looking over this, and I don't question at all the need to have this done. And I just wanted to make sure that voices of students were clearly shared. I see that there's the plan to use the career counseling annual report and student survey. I am not familiar with what's on that survey, so I don't feel like I'm in a good position to answer whether that will be a good source of information to answer the questions that are posed. But if the plan is to do focus groups with career counselors and coaches, I would hope that maybe some consideration would be given to doing focus groups with students. You get a lot of different information. Focus groups are used in a different way than surveys. Surveys, you're used when you know what the questions are. But if some of these things are what experiences, what changes, I think in some ways you can only get that by talking to the folks themselves. So I would encourage that to consider adding in student focus groups or interviews into the plan.
Thank you. We appreciate that feedback. I think that's a really good point. And the detail that was provided is still subject to modification, to revision, so we can absolutely incorporate that. Also, NORC is going to be looking at the data that is available, and to the extent that they don't have the data that they need, they would modify the approach to provide for additional data collection. But we can absolutely incorporate that.
Sounds great.
Are there any other discussion? Okay. So the motion would be to obligate the remaining unspent funds from the fiscal 24 budget, which is when we received the funds for the interim evaluation, for the purpose of modifying the blueprint interim evaluation contract, number 25001, to increase the contract by an amount not to exceed $223,209.23, which is the amount that we have remaining unspent, for the purpose of including new blueprint requirements added to law during the 25 legislative session, and to delegate to the executive director the authority to execute a contract modification that is consistent with this obligation.
Okay, but I so move. There's a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. Any further questions or comment? Hearing or seeing none, the motion is before us. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is so approved.
Okay. The next item relates to office space, and I'll first just give you a brief update. We are making progress, and hopeful to have final drawings for the floor plan very soon, so that the request for permits can be made, and that is the next big step. And then once the permits are issued, then obviously the renovation construction on the space will begin. At this point, we are hoping that we will be able to occupy the space in early 2026. It would be great if we could get in there before the end of this current calendar year, but we don't know how long it will take for the permits to be issued, which has been I guess apparently has been a challenge for other tenants in this building. So what we're asking is to go ahead and encumber the unspent funds that we have from the budget for office space so that we can use those funds to purchase furniture, equipment, and supplies. We can't order those things until the drawings are complete, so we're in a holding pattern. And so the motion would be to encumber $140,000, which is the amount that we do have unspent from the current year budget, for the purpose of procuring, furnishing, supplies, and equipment for the approved office space lease.
Okay, there's motion for that, and I so move. The second to the motion.
Second.
Any unreadiness or questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is so approved.
Thank you. And then next slide, we wanted to just give you an update on the technical assistance grants. And then we also do have a motion on this item as well. And so as phase one of the technical assistance grants, which were awarded for the prior fiscal year, 2024, we do have 5 LEAs that still have unspent funds remaining from the phase one grants for the strategic facilitators. So we have granted them no cost extensions through the end of this calendar year, and that you can see the 5 counties there. For phase two, which are the grants that were provided in for this current fiscal year, we have received requests both for no cost extensions to spend remaining funds, as well as we received requests for additional funding for both the strategic facilitator grants and for the new resource allocation grants that were provided in this current year. You can see in total, we have 18 LEAs that are continuing with their strategic facilitators in phase two, and 22 LEAs that are participating in the resource allocation technical assistance grants. We did not receive any additional funds to provide technical assistance grants in this next fiscal year, 26. But what we have done is identified any monies that we had in our current year budget that we could reallocate to support and continue the technical assistance grants that have been identified by superintendents and blueprint coordinators as very valuable to them and helpful to them. And so you can see that we received requests for almost $600,000 for additional funding. We were able to, we reviewed those requests and try to apply a consistent approach to what was being asked for, funding was being asked for. And so through that process, we identified $361,000 to support additional work with the LEAs. And this is both for resource allocation and strategic facilitators. And then we also have provided additional awards for our strategy leads in the resource allocation and strategic facilitator space for the upcoming 6 months. And so in total, we have about 444,000 in additional awards. The paperwork for processing all of those awards is still in process for many of them. And in addition, we do have a little bit more money that we can encumber to potentially make small modifications in fiscal 26. So we are asking for a motion to encumber $500,000 in unspent fiscal 25 funds for these phase 2 grants.
Okay,
And I see Dr. Kerwin's.
okay.
Yes, real quick, I think you spoke to this, but my impression is that these technical assistance grants have been very much appreciated by the LEAs, and that we have evidence that they have had a positive impact on their work. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And we do meet for the 2 years that we do meet with the strategic facilitators, and we're going to be meeting with the resource allocation partners as well. But yeah, all of the feedback that we've had, we've surveyed them, and we've received unsolicited feedback as well, has been very positive for both the strategic facilitators and the new resource allocation.
It just seems a good use
grants.
of unspent funds to me, and given the impact that these grants have had in the past.
Yes.
Another hand up.
Are there any other questions?
Okay, so I'll make the motion to approve the technical assistance grant. Encumbered monies for that. A second to the motion.
A second.
It moved and properly second that we approve the resources for the technical assistance grant. Are there any unreadiness or questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposition? The ayes have it, so approved.
Thank you. The next item, I will turn to Arshia to provide the update on outreach and communications.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Executive Director Heiss. So just a few updates on outreach and communications. We are, excuse me, close to finishing our LEA implementation progress highlights one-pagers. As a reminder, these are similar to our statewide progress highlights one-pagers, but they are specific to each LEA. The last step in the process that we've been taking is connecting with blueprint coordinators to share this with them, check accuracy, get some input. So we are wrapping that up, and these should be out soon. Our AIB updates continue after each board meeting. We aim to do these monthly, still being sent out to about 2,000 people, and we're averaging about a 50% open rate in clicks and engagement. And these are all posted on our website under our resources page. So if there are any that someone has missed, or if you're not on our email list, you can sign up on our homepage, or you can also see all of these on our website and catch up with the previous ones. We've also been sending out just some more updates in general using our mailing list, given all that's been going on. So for the public input sessions, we've been communicating that via email and social media, and reaching out to partners to share as well. And then lastly, as Rachel mentioned, our long-awaited website redesign is really in progress. We are, as Rachel mentioned, hoping to launch this summer after some delays in getting the development started. We have updated all of our content, and Brittany, our web developer, is building all the different web parts, and we have majority of our pages built out and are really just working on finessing them, making sure the content's there. We also are working on incorporating a lot of new navigation and different parts to make sure our information is digestible, as well as Emma mentioned, data dashboards, which will be launching with the new website as well. We're hoping to have a preview for you all in the July meeting. And that is my update, if there's any questions.
Yeah, I have just a question. The Strong Schools Maryland puts out a regular blast that I think we get on email with updates on the blueprint. And of course, they're independent and they're not part of the AIB in any way, but they are advocates for the goals of the AIB. Do we have good communication? Are we providing them? Are they sort of a steady source of input or interaction with you and our staff?
Yeah, so we just met with some members of Strong Schools in the Blueprint Coalition a few weeks ago. And we have met with them, I would say probably every 6 to 8 weeks. But I also have communicated with their social media team because they've put out posts about public input sessions and things like that. It's
Right.
definitely an area we can grow, but we're definitely in communication with them. Yeah.
Yeah. So my other question was, and you touched on it. It's an area I know very little about. I'm old school op-ed articles in now newspapers that people don't read anymore. Uh, but social media is the new medium by which organizations get their word out about what they're doing. Um, yeah, is there, do we have potential in this regard? Are there social media avenues or initiatives that we could undertake that would be helpful? Now, you got a website and you post on the website, that's a form of social media, but are there are there social media avenues that we ought to look into that would be helpful in telling our story?
Yeah, that's a great question and something that we're diving into. And I think we need to look a little bit too at kind of who our audiences are on the social
Right.
different aspects of social media, because our
Right.
audience on LinkedIn is very different than our audience on Instagram. And a lot of people don't even use Facebook anymore. So
Right.
what we've kind of been focusing on is engaging with partners on social media who may post something that we want to
Right.
uplift. So a lot of school systems do still use formerly known as Twitter, but now X. And so reposting things there as well as on LinkedIn, as well as when we do go to conferences or things like that, uplifting that and tagging our partners to reach their audiences as well. I think that there's still a lot of potential there. Something that I've been interested in looking into is LinkedIn has a newsletter function of its own. So figuring out if we can do our AIB updates through that as well, because our audience on LinkedIn has grown a lot.
Right.
So looking into those types of things. The short answer to your question is there's potential. I don't think it's like the only way we're going to reach people.
Right.
We definitely need different avenues to reaching people, but
Absolutely.
there is still potential of growth there. Rachel, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, I think you covered it. I mean, I think that I think there's room for us to grow it, but I agree. I don't think it's necessarily ever going to be a huge way that we reach most people.
Okay. Anything else, Member Curran?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Arshia. I'm going to turn now to Rachel Amstutz. to talk about the advisory committee process for new members?
Yes, good afternoon. And I apologize, I'm having some video issues, so I can't get off video right now. But the advisory committee process went very well. It has closed. We did receive both nominations and applications this year for the vacancies that we had. I think this slide is information that you're familiar with, that our folks who are appointed to a member seat on any advisory committee serve an initial 2-year term and then are eligible to remain in their role with additional 2-year terms as long as they're still able to attend and regularly participate. And then our student members serve an initial 1-year term and may extend for 1 more year. This year, the chart below is updated. The last time we shared this information with you, we did not know of those who were up for renewal, if they were staying or not staying. And so we did have 1 student member who had exceeded, she had met her 2-year term. And then we had a member in both Pillar 3 and Pillar 4 who are going to be stepping down for different reasons. And then both of our students in Pillar 5 are also going to be stepping down. We can go to the next slide. We want to go ahead and really take a minute to thank those who have been a part of the advisory committees. For our 3 students, it is amazing to watch them in action in the meetings and to hear their voice, see their leadership, watch them engage with the people who come to our advisory committees. They've added great value. I think to Dr. Stapleton's point before, they ask questions differently. They feed Blueprint differently than the adults implementing Blueprint. And so they've really been a wonderful part of the advisory committees. There's 2 asterisks on there that we want to draw attention to and just give a great big shout out for 2 of our members who have been founding members. They've been with us since the beginning of time. And helped us stand it up when it was just an idea. So Olivia Pearson and Kara Burhans are both founding members who are going to be stepping aside for different reasons. But we really want to take a moment and thank them for their commitment to the AIB and the advisory committees and Blueprint, and making sure that voices are heard about the efforts in each of these areas. Next slide. In terms of the process and remaining timeline for replacing members, the application window did close on June 20th. 28 applications were received. 10 of those were students, and 18 of those were for member seats. We are in a timeline beginning on Monday to be reviewing the applications, and from there, the AIB member subcommittee will work with staff to review them all and to identify potential new members. We aim to bring that back to the board for approval in July so that they would be able to begin in as soon at the next meeting that their committee meeting would be having. I believe with that, that's the last slide for this.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Are there any questions about the advisory committee process? Okay, the next slide, last slide, is just an update on the process for AIB members. So as we've discussed, we do have 2 members' terms that are expiring July 1st, Member Manco and Member Stapleton, and Member Doss is resigning from the board, also effective, well, June 30th. And the process for filling vacancies on the AIB is different than for other boards. And so there is something called the AIB nominating committee that is appointed by the governor, the speaker, and the president to accept applications and make nominations to the governor for appointment. The applications for the vacancies were due June 12th, and the nominating committee is scheduled to meet in July and have said that they are hopeful to make their recommendations to the governor in middle to late July. That's the timeline that we're on. Current board members are eligible to reapply, and Dr. Manko has reapplied, so we're pleased about that. But we'll be saying goodbye to member Doss and member Stapleton. And with that,
yeah.
Can we go to the last slide?
Yeah, let me step in for just 1 second on that. And so this is a transition period for us, and one that, in fact, it is the first one that involves a multi list of board members. And I wanted to personally thank the 2 board members who are not applying for reappointment for the tremendous amount of work and time and effort to help us. This first term probably would be one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, because this is a new board. What we are doing is somewhat groundbreaking. It is important. It crosses virtually every segment of life here in the state of Maryland, impacting a great deal of money, resources, time, and effort. And so this has been an awful lot of work. I did not personally anticipate it would be quite as much as we've been engaged in. But when I look back and look at the work of the commission, it is pretty obvious that this is a serious endeavor. And when the commission worked on all of this, they gave us a wonderful blueprint to follow. As we've stated before, it has not been perfect. It has taken a great deal of time and effort. So I want to thank both Member Doss and Stapleton for their contribution. And so we have a resolution that we would like to provide for both of those. But I think that it is important for you to know how much I appreciate your time and your efforts, and how we've arrived at decisions that have been challenging for all of us. And you bring a perspective, you bring knowledge, bring expertise that rounds out the entire array of members of this board. And we could not have accomplished as much as we've accomplished in what I consider to be a still relatively short period of time to get us to where we are today. This is very, very important. And I think in the future, when you see the performance of our students, when you see the uplift in our economic development and how we will advance as a state as a result of this, I think that you will be very proud of what you've done, what you've accomplished, not only for the individual student, but the state of Maryland as well. Before we read the proclamation, I'm going to ask our Vice Chair, Dr. Curran, if he wants to say a word or two before we do so. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. It's hard to follow the words you just expressed, because I think they certainly capture my feelings about these 2 individuals, and I'm sure the other members of the board as well. The seriousness with which you all have taken this responsibility, your contributions during the meetings, your questions you've raised, have all made us a better board. And we can only hope that your replacements can rise to the level of contribution and value that the 2 of you have exhibited. It's both a real sense of loss on a personal level, because I admire you both so much, but also on a professional level, in terms of what you have brought to the board and how you have made us a better organization. So I just want to express my heartfelt thanks for all that you've contributed to our work. And please know how much you're going to be missed.
I like to take sometimes just an example of something that I think is important. We finished a rather lengthy, detailed discussion and engagement on our waiver process that talked about a little bit earlier. I can recall the two of you coming forward with ideas, suggestions that initially seemed somewhat different and somewhat challenging, but you were able to guide us through that process. And I think with your contribution, your insight, I think it helped us, even working with our attorney, to come up with a process that I think is fair, that is balanced, that I think respects the work of the board. And I noted that through our process, that we ended up at a place that I think captured all of the concerns and all of the work that people have been engaged in trying to get us to this point. And the two of you were just steadfast in what we needed to do, how we needed to do it, going into excruciating details to make sure we got it right, because the importance of it, that we not rush through it, and that we do it in a way that will be reflective of all the work and all the efforts that we have and respect the process to go forward. And I think we ended up with the work of Ms. Detterer with a process that I think would be a good model for others to follow. So thank you just particularly on that, because that is something that I think will be a tool that may be used repeatedly in the procedures as we go forward. I'm going to ask the executive director now to read, because I didn't want to read all of it, but I think we should, because I think it reflects the seriousness of your work and your efforts. So if you don't mind reading the resolution, Madam Executive Director.
Sure, absolutely. I'm not going to read it twice. I'll read it once for both of you. So, whereas Dr. Mara Doss and Dr. Laura Stapleton served as inaugural members of the Accountability and Implementation Board from November 15th, 2021 through July 1, 2025, and whereas Dr. Doss has shared her decades of experience and expertise as a community college educator and administrator, and Dr. Stapleton has shared her decades of experience and expertise as a higher education faculty member, particularly in teacher preparation and evaluation methods, to inform the innovative strategies and systems change that the Blueprint for Maryland's Future calls for to improve educational outcomes for all Maryland students. And whereas during their tenure on the AIB, Dr. Doss and Dr. Stapleton contributed significantly to providing strategic guidance, advocating for the Blueprint, and bringing their expertise to the AIB's work, supporting the Blueprint's implementation and achieving its goals to support the once-in-a-generation transformation of the education system as embodied in the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Therefore, be it resolved on the 26th day of June, 2025, that the Blueprint Accountability and Implementation Board sincerely thanks Dr. Mara Doss and Laura Stapleton for their dedicated service and valuable contributions as members of the board in supporting the successful launch of the AIB and the Blueprint for Maryland's Future implementation to achieve its goals for every Maryland child, student, and educator, and to secure a more productive and prosperous future for our great state of Maryland.
And that is
Here.
half of the Blueprint Accountability and Implementation Board by myself as chair, Dr. Curran as vice chair. So thank you, ladies, for your
Bravo.
congratulations.
Thank you all. Well, I'll miss being part of the meetings, but I know where to find them on live stream. And I do also want to say that to somebody who is naive about how state boards work, walking in the door, and probably still quite naive about how they work, I do appreciate everyone's patience with me and with sharing their expertise. And I appreciated meeting all sorts of folks from around the state. Thank you.
Well, this is certainly bittersweet. I'm moving into another phase of life, taking more time to be Bibi, and Bibi is grandmother in Swahili. I applied to be a member of the accountability board because I believed in the blueprint, and it has indeed been an honor to serve with each and every one of you, and most definitely a highlight of my career. And there's so much great work that's being done behind the scenes that folks, of course, cannot see, implementing the blueprint with fidelity. And I wish every success, because a win for the blueprint is, of course, a win for Maryland and for our students. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you both. Okay. Well, this is, as stated before, a bittersweet moment. And I want to again express my gratitude for all the work and contributions that you've made. Anything we need to do further, Madam Executive Director?
That is the end of the business.
Okay. Well, entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Yes, been moved and properly second that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
Favor? I'm sorry. I interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm going to second the motion to adjourn.
Okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
You.